So everyone, I'm trying to count time as we don't have much time. We now have only about 50 minutes to have this conversation. So I'm going to start. And then if someone else arrives, we can just make the space welcome for the person. I'm trying to use this microphone. But yeah, okay. So welcome everyone. I'm Luis. I'm from Impact Hub. As I have just talked in the plenary, we're the biggest organization working with social and impactful businesses around the world, present in 110 different locations. And we're here to facilitate today this conversation about sustainable consumption and production when we talk about life economy. We have some speakers for the first moment. So they're going to have a moment to speak to you about what this topic is, what they are doing related to this topic. And after that, we're going to have a moment for you to interact with each other. As I said, when we talk about art of hosting, it is a lot about connections and conversations. We want to co-create with everyone what's going to happen. So after the 3 waves that we're going to have from today to tomorrow, we can have actual actions and prioritizations from the conversations that we have. So for the first moment, we're going to have this presentation from them, and then a very quick one, and then we're going to make this conversation between all of you. You might see some papers there that you are going to share, but it's more for you to write a little bit of what's coming from the conversation. So afterwards, we can also have all this documented. So just to start the conversation, I wanted to invite Dr. Srikanta K. Panigari, Distinguished Research Fellow and Director General, IISD from India, to talk to us. So thank you.
So welcome to everyone. It's a pleasure occasion where we have met to discuss something very important, and the crux of the entire program, life economy. The consumption and production is key to everything, and you all are aware. This is UN SDG 12. UN SDG, there are 17 goals, out of which it is goal number 12. And we need to be very particular in our choices in consumption. And we have any option and luxury that without any thinking, giving a thought, or mindlessly we can consume anything we like and throw away anything we like, which the way we have lived so far. But it is very challenging now. We need to be very particular. We have hardly any choice. Planet doesn't have much resources left. We are consuming a little less than 2 of the planets now, and we have, you all are aware about water footprint, ecological footprint, and carbon footprint. All these footprints are interrelated to themselves, and considering reducing our ecological footprints, we have to be very mindful regarding what we consume, to the extent we consume, and whether whatever we consume, it is meeting the complete recyclability and the circle as a recyclable economy, and we are the circle is complete. That is leading to innovative financial models, and also the most important thing is the economy part of it. This thing. So in circular economy is key, that we must remember. And in India, we have extended producers' responsibility. The government has a certain circular and notification that all the industries and even non-industrial activities who are involved in production and consumption should be responsible enough to manage the waste which is created because the consumption of their products, to complete the circle. And the resource of efficiency, of course, is the key and meeting the objectives of circular economy. So we know the enough of theory. The most important things is in very simple things, like if we are consuming something, if we are going to the market to buy something, there are legislation, there are law. that we should not get into single-use plastic. But the shopkeeper keep on using the single-use plastic, and the consumers also are very happy to accept this. So this has to be stopped somewhere, and not somewhere immediately. It has to be stopped, and we can always take a jute bag, and we should have our bags of our own, thereby stopping this kind of wasteful circularity, and encouraging single-use plastics use. And there are many such use. Like in the morning, we have very powerful sessions. The choice is, after eating food, either we use tissue paper, or we use a cloth with water. Water consumption also involved. Washing cloth is also involved. In the other way, tissue paper, eliminating forest and some trees are also involved. So we need to see and evaluate scientifically which consumption is genuine, and by adopting which kind of livelihood practices we can cause minimum damage to natural systems. And we all have to be calculating always, very mindful always, how we are living. And life mission was launched with a great expectation that all the individual of the planet will be mindful in their own resource consumption. And now, unless it is related to economy, it will not succeed and not go beyond. So various modalities of efficient resource utilization is being discussed with practical examples, and I will welcome the rest of my panelists and the participants to share their very valuable contributions and to make this discussion successful.
Thank you so much. Now we're going to go to Mr. Daniel Kerr from GIZ.
Thank you so much. I'm Daniel, working in GIZ, the international corporation from Germany, and my heart beats for transformative change and social change. And I would like to start with a notion that has been come forward, that there's an estimation that in 2020, it was the year where for the first time the dead matter, meaning material, living material being converted to dead matter for roads, for stuff that we can buy and so on. So in 2020, the dead matter was for the first time more than the living matter on Earth. And this trend still continues. So actually we still are on that pathway, moving from a life economy to a dead economy. And if we can't convert this, we'll have a serious problem. And as we have heard, the consumption options globally are unequal very much. And so the big question, of course, is how can we level consumption rates within planetary possibilities? A friend of mine just sent me a picture of the German Christmas markets with a lot of stuff from plastic and so on, saying, we don't need all of this stuff. And I strongly agreed with him. So we at least two Germans already saying that we don't need all of this stuff. And I'm sure there are many, many more. So let me finally move to the consumption side, putting on the table a proposal that was forwarded by a number of authors, implying what they call human ecological or universal ecological human rights, meaning that every human on Earth would have the same consumption rights, human rights basically, don't matter whether it be a young girl in Africa or me in Germany or whoever, would have the same options and rights to consume resources on Earth. And this within the planetary possibilities that we have, based on that model of planetary boundaries, and Kate Raworth with the donut and so on. So what if we put this proposal on the table and further work on this equal consumption rights globally? Thank you.
Thank you so much. We're moving now to Dr. Shaili Kedia, Senior Fellow from TERI, India.
Yeah, thank you so much. So I'll just come directly to the question in your context. How is life economy providing innovative solutions? So normally when we talk about sustainable consumption production, and at least this is a framework which we have applied in our research at TERI, we look at broadly three categories of instruments: policy instruments, market instruments, and social instruments, which in a way like kind of offer innovative solutions for a life economy. We are seeing many interesting developments in India, in the domestic sphere itself. When we talk about the recent initiatives in India, quite apart from the fact that it has played a major role in internationalizing life through the G20 forum, when we look at it, what it has done in India itself, just within the last year, just very recently notified in October, we had the Green Credit Guidelines, which is a market instrument through which sustainable lifestyle is being promoted. And when we also talk about rights-based approaches, India is a democracy. Rights-based approaches become very important in this context, and India is very actively talking about the right to repair. So that is the other innovation, and it provides ample opportunity for a life economy. Because of course we're talking about circularity, but we're also talking about creating jobs, in this sector, and in a way that also offers to be social instruments. Another area which, as a part of our sustainable consumption production work at TERI, we've been engaged with is green public procurement. Definitely, this is one of the key instruments which has a huge potential, both from the policy as well as market side, to promote not just green products but also green services. And this is where India is looking at this paradigm a bit differently. If you look at the GEM portal, we are not just talking about products but services. And a service economy, one that is green, offers tremendous potential for also a life economy. For instance, in service, the government of India is also in the process of providing service to provide services to, let's say, PSUs who want to go net zero. So, that is the level of life economy solutions that we're talking about, and, we are working on. Finally, but not the least, because it also talks about barriers faced in these approaches, one of the massive barrier which we have come across in our work on sustainable consumption production, whether we talk about SDG 12, which, my previous speakers have highlighted, is there is a data gap. We do not collect enough of consumption as if consumer level data that is available in the public domain. What is available is household data, and that too is covered based on expenditure. So definitely there needs to be, firstly, more consumption related data and metrics that need to be captured. And of course we're talking about barriers, and how they can be overcome. Of course, data one is technology. We can talk about citizen science. There are many ways. Of course, artificial intelligence is something which we talked about. That is one of the ways we can leverage technology. But quite apart from that, when we talk about barriers, we also need to see this further internalized, not just at the international level but at the subnational level, that is specific life related issues. So I just wanted to just end with flagging these issues. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much. So now we go to Dr. Posh Raj Pandey, Chairman of SAOT, Nepal.
Thank you. Well, the previous speaker, they talk about the rationale for sustainable production, consumption, circular economy, and also some initiatives taken in their respective countries. Well, let me start with some numbers based on the report produced by IEA, International Energy Agency, on sustainable consumption. I mean, it states that behavioral change and sustainable consumption choice would reduce annual global CO2 emissions by more than 2 billion ton in 2030. And this is about 1/5 of the emission reductions needed by 2030 to put all on a pathway towards net zero emission. And out of this 2 billion ton, about 1.1 gigaton comes from behavioral change, and maybe 1 GT gigaton that comes from sustainable consumption. And within behavioral change, 0.7 gigaton that comes from transport sector, particularly increased use of public transport or more eco-friendly driving practice or shift to high-speed rail. I mean, these are some examples, I mean, which can reduce this emission. And at household levels, maybe it's 0.4 GT gigaton comes from change in heating system, and also turning life and other appliances when they are not in use. And in addition to this, behavioral change, 1 gigaton would be from consumer choice towards low emission option. That is particularly, energy efficient appliance and equipment, and purchase of electrical vehicle, and also use of rooftop EV. Well, here we are talking about this transport or EV or efficient appliance. Here the technology is the game changer, and it is the key in reduction in emission. But here I just want to raise up the issues of technology transfer, access to technology by developing and least developed countries. Here for life economy, we need technology for renewable energy, energy conservation, clean transport, water management, waste management, sustainable agriculture, green building. But here we need technology. But if you look at existing regime of technology transfer and intellectual property rights, particularly through patent regime, trade secret, and industrial design, it bars developing countries to adopt efficient and green technology. Here the challenge for us is to how to strike a balance between the desire of developed countries to protect intellectual property rights, and also to incentivize research and development, and the access to developing countries to green technology at affordable price. Here we need to have some sort of non-antagonistic way to access technology. That is the one issue I just wanted to raise. And another that is also related to technology. In the context of emerging geopolitics, geoeconomics, and deglobalizations, and also now people are talking about friendshoring. So that these factors obstructs that value chain process. So in this context, how this technology transfer will be possible? Because now technology has been nationalized and also it has been weaponized In that context, how can we access technology? That is another issue. And the third issue is we are talking about sustainable consumption, sustainable productions, and circular economy. But the question is, how are we going to monitor the the effect of specific, I mean, sustainable consumption and production practice, as well as overall progress in sustainable consumption and production? I mean, for this, I mean, what would be the assessment method? Or, I mean, what would be the indicators? What kind of metrics, what kind of data we need? How we are going to collect, I mean, all those data to monitor progress in sustainable consumption and production, as well as in circular economy. And here, after all, I mean, we are talking about this sustainable consumption and productions. I mean, here, after all, individuals and families which are embedded in the society are the supreme actor in sustainable consumption, production, and circular economy.
Dr. Pandey,
Just 2 minutes.
okay, just 1 minute so we can prepare time.
And individual or family opt for sustainable consumption, then production will follow, circular economy will follow. Then my argument is we have to focus on an individual, but individual choices and bringing change in individual behavior, that depends on complex, I mean, socio-cultural factor, and also their sometimes altruistic, maybe I'm sometimes environmental concern, and all these factors, I mean, and also sometimes their purchasing power, and sometimes the available public infrastructure. I mean, all these determine the choices individual makes. So here the issue is how to balance between consumption, particularly sustainable consumption, individual choice or rights. I mean, the previous speaker rightly pointed out, and most importantly, hedonistic consumption. That is another issue. I mean, look at fashion industry. Total global industry is of the size of more than $3 trillion, and it contributes around 10% of global, I mean, global emissions. How we are going to make that industry more sustainable? That is another issue. Okay, I stop over here. Thank you.
Thanks so much. We're going to have some more time to discuss with the groups, but now I'm going to pass it over to Mr. Vasant Pandit from DRI, India.
Thank you. As so many of my colleagues have mentioned, at the heart of the efforts to achieve SDGs, the Sustainable Development Goals, is the message encapsulated in SDG 12, which is ensure sustainable consumption and production patterns. Without it, nothing can be achieved. And it is at the core of all 17 goals, 169 targets, and 232 indicators. The most important point in this discussion is that sustainability is in direct contradiction to modern society's emphasis on maximizing consumption and production with more and more efficient technologies. It's total paradox. And the second paradox is that the countries that have endorsed the Sustainable Development Goals, and specifically goal number 12, look to economies of scale to measure their progress, GDP, and their citizens' well-being in the most efficient production methods that create more and more goods and more consumption. So there's a huge paradox here that needs to be addressed if we want to go forward. To change the correct economic model and the societal norms on consumption, a paradigm shift is required in all of us individual thought processes. Spirituality will play a major role in this. As, without spirituality, we won't get anywhere. And ethics is the only thing that can provide a pathway for spirituality in everyday life and action. Pandit Deendayal Upadhyaya, whose philosophy of integral humanism articulated this idea in the 1960s, and he talked about sustainable production and sustainable consumption in a big way. And there's a whole bunch of quotes, but I will just take the most important quote relevant to this. It is essential, therefore, to use up that portion of available natural resources which nature itself would be able to recoup easily. The industrialist provides for a depreciation fund to replace machineries when they are worn out. Then how can we neglect the depreciation fund for nature? From this point of view, it must be realized that the object of our economic system should not be to make extravagant use, but a well-regulated use of available resources. It will not be wise, however, to engage in a blind rat race of consumption and production. Such a system alone can be called civilization. This system will not thrive on the exploitation of nature, but will sustain nature and will in turn itself be nourished. Milking rather than exploitation should be our aim. The system should be such that the overflow from nature is used to sustain our lives. That was Deen Dayal ji in the 1960s, and it's as relevant, more relevant today than it was when he wrote it. It is our premise in Deen Dayal Research Institute that for any hope of this becoming a universally acceptable proposition, spirituality is the key to its success. Spirituality emphasizes the oneness of man with nature and Bharatiya Sanskriti, which is our core values. It encapsulates the conscious connection between man and nature, man and water, man and the forest, man and agriculture, man and the environment. Today, if you go into rural India, the tribals that go into the forest to take honey, earlier, because of their spiritual connect with the forest, they used to cut a part of the hive, 3/4 of the hive, and keep a quarter to rejuvenate. Today, they cut the branch because the demand is so high and their core values have been lost. In the area we work, there's a fruit called aula, which is very rich in vitamin C. And it used to be picked when the fruit was fully grown, which was in, I think it was in January, February. And that allowed pollination to happen and the ecosystem to survive. Today, because of the demand from pharmaceutical companies, the aula is cut when it's premature. They cut the branch, they don't pluck the fruit, and they destroy. It has great environmental implications because the pollination process is not complete. So in Deen Dayal Research Institute, we are trying to work with rural communities to reimagine how they produce and how they utilize resources. Deen Dayal ji used to call it production by the masses as opposed to mass production. And if we need to move back to that kind of model to be able to move forward with this conversation. So that's something to look at because it's an elephant in the room, the GDP values. Thank you.
Thank you so much. So now before we go to some further conversation, let's go to Dr. Sawayam Prabha Das, AVP and Lead Policy Research and Planning of Development Alternatives Group in India.
Thank you so much. And I think the context is very well led. And thank you, Dr. Pandit, for setting the context to my conversation here. I would like to take from where Dr. Pandit has just stopped, and I would like us to reflect a bit on the interconnectedness between humans to the environment. And that's actually what Dr. Pandit was trying to say. And I would like to just ask you to pause for a minute and think about the time when the last you had a cold drink from a glass bottle and not a pulpit bottle. Yeah. So I think those are the days of my childhood when I would have a cold drink from a bottle return and get 20 paisa back, which would actually go into my kitty. So that's how I earned that 20 paisa for recycling that bottle, which was built into my behavior. When I was growing up, I used to get clothes from my older cousins and hand-me-downs from me to my younger cousins. Where have we lost it in the process? Why does my kid need to go to H&M, Shoppers Stop, and buy stacks of clothes and not wear what her cousin would hand her down? So what has shifted? What has moved? Why are we not talking about the way we lived earlier? So there's a lot of consumerism, there's a lot of advertisements, there's a lot of privatization that's doing the rounds, but we are not really talking about sustainability in our core practice, in our own subconscious mind. I think that needs to shift. We need to shift gear not forward, but take a step back and push the gear back, which would be the fifth gear. In a car, if you know, it's an H, right? The fifth gear is always to the back, not to the front. So when we do the fifth gear, it actually propels us forward, but then it also helps us reconnect back to the environment, back to the practices that many of us here have been used to it. So can we not have some thumb rules which is based on recovery, regeneration, and reproduction? And this is moving behind, beyond the hours of recycling, repurposing, redesigning, all of those. These are the 3 R's that connects us to the environment. So it's not process driven. It's really not process driven. It's the interconnectedness that's driving us. So when you step back, you allow for the environment or nature to recover, to regenerate, and also reproduce. Like Dr. Pandit said, that you're harvesting early on, but you're not letting that to reproduce, grow, and recover on its own. So you are actually damaging the entire process of recovery, regeneration, reproduction. So can we pause and think that can our actions, our thinking somewhere take this into account when we're going forward? That brings me to the next point of where we are in our traditional knowledge. So when you talk about innovative solutions, we need to reflect back into our traditional knowledge. We used to have cups, we used to have, water in clay, in kulhad, baked clay cups, mugs. We used to eat on leaf plates. That's there, and they're all biodegradable. I remember, if you go in, I'm from Orissa, and when we had family feasts and all, we used to have it on a banana leaf. In South, you still have it on banana leaves. So can we not think about something which is sustainable rather than make that into a product and start marketing that in the European markets? The leaf plates with a coat of plastics is actually sold in Europe as sustainable. And I'm sorry, that's not sustainable. It has a coat. And leaf plates are to be, used within a certain period of time. Otherwise, it will become brittle and it will break. So you said technology is for convenience, but here technology is actually disrupting. And I think our esteemed guest from Nepal also said that, technology is, we are using it more for our convenience. But do we need that technology which is actually disrupting our connectivity to the nature, to the environment? We need to rethink that. When it comes to, I would also like to connect to what Dr. Panigrahi said, that sometimes the shopkeeper gives you plastic. We have the right to say no. It can't be forced on us. As a consumer, I have a right to say no. And let's start refusing. We seldom do that because of convenience. So once we start refusing and build it within our mindset, our behaviors will automatically change And that chain reaction is very easy because you would have that within your family, within your friend cultures, and within the people in your office, at home, in your neighborhood. So that kind of catches on. So it has a rippling effect. So you need to build those kind of things in. So rethink, refuse are, in my opinion, the first two and foremost R's that we need to put into our everyday practice. Then we need to think about recovery, regeneration, reproduction of our ecosystems and the environment around us. I would then like to bring you to something that a concept that I wrote with Mr. Amitabh Kant, Sherpa of G20 India. And we talked about the concept of prana, P-R-A-N-A, which in other words also translates to life force. So there I have spoken about a pact for rebuilding, accelerating and nudging actions to achieve SDGs or to achieve your life mission. So I would stop with that thought. Can we come up with something, a pact, which is for a benefit of a larger good? I'll stop at that. Thank you.
Thank you so much. And now with all these speeches that we just had, we're going to have a moment. As we're just running out of time, we will need to go for lunch in 10 minutes. I just wanted to provoke here some conversation before we come back and have conversations with the panelists. Something that we would like to propose is that you have those papers with you. We have some questions that we would like to address, because part of this summit is also to understand from the public that is participating on the summit what are the ideas that are popping up. So with the question that we have for this specific session, which is what are the barriers faced by these approaches on the life economy and how they can be addressed, I just would like you to face 2 or 3 people around you and have a conversation. We're going to have just 10 minutes before, and write down some ideas of what are the barriers that you see that we are facing, and what are the and how they can be addressed. And then after 10 minutes, we just come back for a closing moment, and then we're going to pick up the paper. So if you can just write down some of the ideas, we're going to use that collective knowledge to also do a report after the event. So, yeah. Yeah, you can use the back as well.
Can I come back on some of these comments which have been made?
We can.
Yeah, because there's some very fundamental things which have been missed out.
Okay.
Now, when we talk of sustainable consumption and production, let me remind you that this was first captured by the Earth Summit in June '92, Chapter 4. I just wanted to remind all of you. Rio. And then the United, at Rio, June '92, Agenda 21, Chapter 4. Please read that. Number 2, the United Nations guidelines for consumer protection was amended, and a chapter G was added on sustainable consumption. A lot of these issues in terms of policy issues have been addressed in those 2 documents. And then, of course, SDGs, SDG 12, as we said. Now, what is, unfortunately, this is the trouble we always do, we try to reinvent the wheel. A lot of discussion, a lot of thought has gone into these 2 documents. If you go back into that and look at the kind of policy prescription and where is it that we have succeeded or not succeeded, that we can move forward. And this is a tragedy which I see moderated across the board, number 1. Number 2 is Paushadji. He spoke about hedonism, and Basant Panditji reminded us of Deen Dayal Upadhyay, another one of our great thinkers. Let me remind you of hedonism addressed by Mahatma Gandhi when he said there is enough on this earth for everybody's need, but not for anybody's greed. Now that is a metaphor or a talisman which needs to be spread out, more effectively, more. Now, let me, in terms of one of the instruments for sustainable consumption and production, which is being used everywhere, started by Germany in 1977, the Blue Angel. It was first called an environmentally friendly label. Then they decided to change the name to environmental label because it was challenged that, look, any product cannot be environmentally friendly. 100% impossible. To give you an example of what a product cannot be, like services, somebody said. The airport train in Stockholm and Oslo are all environmentally friendly. They have an eco mark on it. the environmental label on it. Now, the whole train is not environmentally friendly, but the fact is that you're using their service instead of using a motor car is environmentally friendly, and therefore, even in Germany, some of these trains which go through fairs provide an environmental ticket. So it's happening in many places. Now, there are private labels also. In USA, for example, the biggest country, there are private labels. I mean, I'm talking about environmental labels. In India, we have an environmental label called EcoMark, but it has been moving in fits and starts, and we hope that it will start again. What our Honorable Prime Minister told them, that look, this goes to circular economy as well. He said, let's take up waste products and use that to recycle use a waste product to create a new product and give that an environmental label. I'll give you a small example. Many people may not realize that we go to hotels, we use a soap, we never consume the whole soap. One entrepreneur in Bombay has been collecting this used soap everywhere and remelting it, reassembling it into fresh soaps, and there is nothing wrong in that. I mean, very simple circular economy, plus it deserves an environmental label as well. I can give you 101 examples. Let me stop there. But what we did find in implementing the EcoMark scheme in India is that manufacturers want a fiscal incentive. So we have to look at the policy framework as to where do we, So, moderator, my point here is that we've had a lot of conceptual discussions, and lady here from Development Alternatives did relate concept to policy. But unless we get very clear policy, now, for such, friendshoring is now going to become a fashion, which means you're going to look at more and more north-south divide. So if you're looking at TOT or technology, transfer of technology, it's not going to be an easy thing. Let me tell you that. It has never been easy for so far. Now in addition, we have now in the commercial field, we're talking about ESG, environmental, social, and governance standards. And ESGs are going to become another trade barrier. Now, all developing countries need to grow, and exports is the way they will grow. And therefore, they have to comply with these kind of tough conditions which are coming up. And these will be countered by friendshoring or nearshoring. Nearshoring is another thing that you will probably add, Nepal and India would be better off than buying from Germany, for example. Now, the UNGCP, United Nations guidelines, also recognizes the right to repair, by the way. Yeah, incidentally, India has passed the Right to Repair Act. Now, these are examples which can be looked at, which can be then, be part of the larger policy prescription. Thank you very much.
Thank you. So now we are going to move to lunch very soon. So I just wanted to change a little bit the dynamic that we have planned. But now just take like 2 minutes to think then about those things. And we're going to open for 3 or 4 comments.
I'll make one.
Yeah. And then while someone is talking, we can take just some minutes to work on these 2 questions. So who are the enablers that we have for this to move forward? And also, what are the things that are stopping us to move forward in this conversation? Yeah. And then we can wrap up to go for the next moment. Okay?
Yeah. As a layman, I will start the word. What has been offered by our very honorable and prestigious setups like World Bank or UNO Charter, that doesn't mean anything to government unless they are forced upon in the form of regulatory or instructional methodology. I'll give you 2 sharp regulatory. First of all, this academia has to step in. What happens, what we all read when we are grown up with already our built up habits and also doesn't make any difference or good of it. I'm sorry to say very hard word, it's not bad. We should start teaching this thing in class 1 and KG itself. For example, the ladies talked about the recycling, reusing the thing. What I'm trying to say, first example, sharp, teach the child, he will not be allowed to buy the new books because the last year books can be used, which we as youngsters, every year you have to buy a dictionary, as if any changing dictionary should be stopped. Number 2, the used clothes of the child going every year, dress has to be changed, should be submitted back to the school and issued from the school itself because they can be used. Like early years when multiple children among the family used to share the like, when Dr. Bara talked about it. If that
inculcation of habits at the formative years of 5 years, 6 years, or 10 years, it will yield. Otherwise, what I'm hearing, like Kyoto Protocol, this protocol, that protocol, I have got white hair, about to die in few years ahead. Nothing is changing. Sir, you will appreciate me. By referring book number so and so, level number so so, who bothers? Say, like country like India, 140 crores, not even 1 lakh read those documents. What about 139 crore people? Unless they are those, for example, education policy. No school will prescribe any book from the market, has to be bought, issued by the school, and so that school book can use. Say out of 100 books, maybe 10 are worn out, they can recycle, but all has to be issued by school, submitted back to school after close of school. But unfortunately, academia, in collaboration with the so-called vested corporate interests, are totally against it. I remember in our childhood, we used to buy and read the books which our grandfather have read. But my own daughters, just 1 year ahead of each other, they are not reading the book. Every year they have to buy school, they give, they don't allow in old books. So unless that stops, you have to put at the seeding level, not at the level when the tree has grown. If a tree has grown in a certain fashion, it will behave that way only. That's what is sanskara, was dharmic value, what Mauni talked about. So we should ensure at the age of 5 to 10 years, the children are not allowed to use anything unless except the cycling. The lady talked about the food habit. Why we should have plastic? I have lived in Himachal and at Deep South also, being all India services all over the country. There was a tendency, there was no pollution in Himachal about 30 years back because of reason. You eat the food in the local leaves. Now they are carrying the plastics, which doesn't die for years together, and you're stinking to everything. So my sharp comment, sorry, I'm not talking in a very professional way, because I've been part of Telecom, part of 5G group of the country, 6G group of the country. First, when it was formed, being a member of Telecom Commission, Digital Communication member in 2021, we talked new thing to happen. What about the old thing? Where they'll go away? So the recycling policies, you may make sure you cannot buy new thing unless you have a policy how you use the old thing. We as a telecom exchange in 50s and 40s stall were having 50 years life cycles. They are reusable items. They were disposed very, very better. But today electronics, you buy this thing and average life is hardly 7 months, 8 months of smartphone at times a year. You throw it off, but we don't know what happened to cadmium of it. We don't know about I have so many things. So to cut short thing, sorry, I'm taking a bit longer.
I think,
I'm saying.
Let us hear others.
Yeah, I'm finishing with another 10 seconds. So my point is, irrespective of this, unless regulatory environment at the level of primary education created where recycling the focus about the consumption being by children should be a focal point. Otherwise, all things may not lead or yield that result what we are seeking for or trying for. Thank you for long comment and sorry.
Thanks. Just asking about time before we.
Yeah.
Do we have time? How much time do we still have?
Actually, we are run out of time, but it will be only late for all of you for lunch. It is up to you. You can continue, but 2:30 we'll be meeting at the next session. That is fixed. Okay, please.
I'm Deepak Maheshwari.
Right, yeah.
With the clear. Just wanted to mention 2 quick points. One, it would be helpful if you carry a hanky with you. Okay, so that's one. Second is using multimodal transport, because yes, I mean end-to-end public transport might be a challenge, but in between there is a possibility. And thirdly, there could also be a situation of let's say having a premium pricing on things which you want to disincentivize. For example, if there's a higher level of tax on shopping bags, for example. Okay, that's
just one remark. This, when we talk of sustainable consumption and production, we have both aspects of lifestyles and the production processes, which should be environmental friendly, sustainable, socially inclusive, and so on and so forth. In fact, a few days before the summit, I had the privilege of meeting Dr. Rita Khanna, who is kind enough to be present in the August gathering here. She is a senior scientist in the Ministry of Environment and Forest. She is heading the LIFE mission there. She had so many examples to narrate. If you don't mind, you can,
run through. So, I'm Rita Khanna, advisor, as he has mentioned, from Ministry of Environment and Forest. So I will not say much has been done, but I can't say nothing has been done. See, for example, I can quote you, Mission Life document has been come out from NITI Aayog. So we have 7 themes, and under 7 themes, we have mentioned 75 action items, which are very, very doable. And it is just an indicative list. You can go ahead. So these are the small actions. You know, our agenda is, so let's not use let's not do mindful and deliberate utilization. We should do mindful and deliberate utilization, so that, you know, whatever little small things can be done, we should try to become pro planet person. So that's first agenda. Now, as far as somebody has mentioned, what are we doing? Ministry of Education, you know, like they are going to have one chapter on life in their national curriculum framework is being revised, and chapter would be there. Recently, we have worked with ITC, and they have come out with the notebooks, and the notebooks will have the creatives on life. These are the small actions. You know, you are forced to turn off the notebook, and you'll see what possibly you can do. Then Ministry of Tourism has come out with sustainable tourism. The document is called Travel for Life. Then we have Mahua. They have come out with 17,000 triple R centers where you can give your old clothes, old gadgets. So it is not that nothing has been done. Things are moving, but perhaps there are many programs from the Ministry of Environment itself. For example, you have Mishti, you have Amrit Dharohar, you have extended producer responsibility, you have circular economy. All these examples are under life. So with this, I'll say thank you.
Can I make one quick point?
Yeah.
Yeah. When it comes to ensure sustainable production and conservation, I'll just give an example. Involvement of indigenous knowledge and community as an establishment space. I will give the example of forest with respect to the state of Meghalaya. They have a very wonderful practice. They call it sacred forest. So the sacred sphere are preserved there basically because there is an element of indigenous knowledge plus the community's involvement. Otherwise, by now, the Northeast would have become a barren land. So involvement of the community with the indigenous knowledge will be one way, a significant way of preserving, I think, forest and making it sustainable. And the last point which I would like to make, see, normally the present arrangement of production is based on the Schumpeterian concept of creative destruction. You have a mobile today and immediately next day somebody comes with the new technology, it's gone. So somewhere or other actually need to change that theory and practice that it should be creative destruction based on the element of sustainability. If that could be brought in, I think that would bring a new change with whole practice of production in the whole world. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Just I wanted to add one quick point. Because in India, in fact, and globally also, so spirituality is always dominating in our society. In fact, there was a lot of water leakages from the houses, and we started controlling, but we failed a lot. And there were persons who were hiding that their bathrooms and this thing leaking. But when one message was just propagated, if there is any single drop of water is leaking from your tap, in that case Varun Devata, they get disappointed, and there will be huge drainage of unnecessary flow up and wastage of money from your house. Then everybody got the point, and then he started contacting the plumber, and the matter was resolved within 2-3 days, and there was no this thing. So sometimes they relate, and the man is by interest himself is a selfish person. So we need to connect their interest, how it is working in favor of you and you only. Then it will work. So spirituality, we must take support of that thing. Thank you very much.
Perfect. So
one comment, just
yes,
quickly.
quick one.
Yeah. See, I think as some of the speaker already spoke about, I'm looking the policy aspect of that. That the policy, if you look at the policy, we measure the GDP, the growth. We focus on the production side. Incentives are taken into account, but we don't have any method to take what incentive going for consumption. I think that is the key where behavioral change is required. Yes, that is required. Like, yeah, that is another like example in Delhi. Why the polythene get failed, right? Because we don't have the economic alternatives. So for that, alternatives are to be required the same time when we have the consumption change. So this is something I want to add. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. So now just to wrap up, so we can move to the next. We just really need to wrap up. Yes, that's a good point. That's a really good point.
Nobody's talking about Brazil.
But so now I'm just going to give 30 seconds or 1 minute for each of the speakers just to give a final speech. And if you can write down your ideas on the papers that we have, we're going to collect them. So we're going to use that for the further moments. So yeah, so we can start in the same order. So Doctor, you can make your final 1 minute.
The most important is we need to open our mind and think what we are going to do and what is its implications in terms of resource consumption and the planetary stability. And we have to be very, very particular and mindful the action we are putting forward.
Thank you. Mr. Daniel?
Thank you so much. I think all has been said. Everybody's the speaker here in the room, so I forward that opportunity.
Thank you. Dr. Shaley?
Yes, coming from a very policy research perspective, definitely policy nudges are needed for both individual as well as nudges in markets.
Thank you. Dr. Pandey?
Well, I would like to re-emphasize, the behavior of individuals and the household, particularly with regard to redesign, rethink, and repurpose their activities to promote life economy. That's my point. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Pandit?
Thank you. I'd just like to invite all of you all to Chitrakoot to come and see the work we do on the ground and help us further the models that we do on the ground for sustainable production and sustainable consumption with communities in rural centers.
Thank
You're
you.
all most welcome to come.
Thank you. Dr. Pravadas?
It's all there in our culture, hidden in our traditional knowledge, and we should kind of open those books, take a look at how we can define life in a more sustainable and a more integrated manner.
Thank you so much. A round of applause. So we're moving to lunch now.
Okay, good. No.
And if you have the papers, if you write something, we're going to
One more, if you feel somehow not understand, I would suggest that you can jot down your points, send it across to us. We have planned to publish the proceedings of this summit. We will include all those viewpoints. Thank you very much.
Used to this. Again, my name is Kosuma. I'm from Cambodia, and I'm going to be the facilitators of this action lab. And in this, I'm going to have our reporters, two of us here. They're going to capture, not take note from everything, but captures the output coming from the two questions that listed into our agenda. And we have 3 guest speakers with us today that they're going to do an initial remark. So since we only have 1 hour of the session, and in order for us to harvest the output out of it, I would like to introduce some rule for all of us here that we have been using in the art of hosting. First one, I would like to invite all of you to invite openness and invite the curiosity. This means that we would like to invite all of you to listening with intention while the other speakers are speaking. And as well, if this is your chance to speak, we would like to invite you to speak with the intention as well. Maybe you can I would like also to invite you to take care of the group well-being and offer what you need, offer what you can, and ask for what you need. This is the bell that I'm going to use, which means that if you hear the bell, this means that you have less than 1 minute to wrap up everything. And then we're gonna give the next chance to other speaker to speak. In this session, we're going to divide it into 3. First one, I'm going to invite our keynote speaker to share about the organization and also the brief summary answer to the question that we have in the Action Lab 2. And then we're going to break into a group of 4 to 5. And how to break into the group, you can choose whoever you want to be a group with, could be people next to you, and then all of you will be given this paper. Basically, is the 2 questions that we have, and in these questions, I would like you to drive your own conversation in your own group, and I would like to invite your team. Maybe one of the team member can play a role as an harvester, which means that you can write down what other people, other speaker, other participant have mentioned, and just write it down. We're going to have around 30 minutes for this, and after that, we're going to do a big harvesting, which means that we're going to invite each of the team to share, to stand up and share. And we're going to use the popcorn style, which means that you can, after you share for 2 minutes, you can pass it to the other group to share as well. And if we have time, we can do it an open floor for everyone to add additional input for our repertoire to add in. Do you have any question? No. Thank you. So without further ado, I would like to invite our first keynote speaker. I would like to invite Dr. Priyadashi Dash, Associate Professor from OIS, to do an initial remark. You have 3 minutes for this.
Thank you. And also good afternoon, colleagues here. As she mentioned, it's not just speaker-driven session, it's all of us contributing to the subject that we have at hand. So there are 2 types of questions. The broad question that we have today for all the 5 sessions of this session is what life economy offers to us to make change in the way we see development strategy, financing, and how to respond to that in the form of the financial entities, MDBs, and all these. First of all, if you see in the G20 platform for the last few years, we have been talking about catalyzing private capital, how to incentivize the private capital to forthcome and support the public sector initiatives the way climate adaptation is happening. Unfortunately, the magnitude of capital, private capital flowing to sustainability related projects is not to the desired amount that we are looking for. Second, the innovative financing instruments that we are thinking of, social impact bonds, issuing local currency green bonds, that also at a very infant stage. Perhaps the problem lies in the harmonizing the regulations for the capital markets, for the innovative financial instruments to be scaled up, even though at the local level it has been tried. But fundamentally, as highlighted by different organizations from time to time, the finance for mitigation and the finance for adaptation is unfortunately asymmetric. There has been higher allocation to mitigation than adaptation. And what is required for developing countries is the adaptation finance, because they need a roadmap to catch up with it in terms of technologies, capacity building, and others. Unfortunately, as of 2020, the share of adaptation in total climate finance is only 34%, which is much below the desired level. And in terms of the magnitude, it is 28.6 billion. And it has been mentioned in different 28.6 billion in 2020. So this number has to increase. And if you see in terms of the adaptation cost and adaptation financing in the future, at least up to 2030, it will be 5 to 10 times higher than what we are doing now. So we need to think about that. Second thing, when you think of the MDB ecosystem responding to the climate finance, what it requires that the conventional project funding, they had this ESG provision, even though much of this ESG awareness, there was environmental social ESG compliance before also. But what is required, that how do they orient the project preparation stage, the countries, the farms, everybody to align their projects to the sustainability principles. So that requires a lot of homework in terms of capacity building of the institutions, the farms. They need to understand where exactly the risks mitigation instrument to come in. If they are going to say that if there are utility projects, say water projects, or say say sanitation projects, railway projects. How do they convert that conventional project model to a sustainability aligned model, and how governments and the markets also make sure that the funding they were doing before is aligned to sustainability principles. For example, if ADB is going to fund, how ADB will assess a project sufficiently adhering to the sustainability principles? How will they do that? And we have project preparation facility and all these. So how to educate the local institutions, municipals and others to go for such kind of thing? So that there are observations by institutions that if you think of private capital, that incentivizing corporate investment in R&D for climate innovation, coming up with climate technologies, especially the startups, that they could prepare at a very early stage of the technology before the technology gets matured. And the MDBs should focus more on adaptation financing and not just going in an incremental fashion. Perhaps the co-financing is the best option, because why a particular MDB will bear that much of risks if they are not sure about how much the ultimate project benefit for the life economy. So a co-financing model where they can share the capital, perhaps invest in promoting certain technologies and watch how in following the life economy principle, countries are coping up with the overhauling of the entire financing framework. So that is one. Philanthropy participation in blended finance. Indonesian presidency has highlighted blended finance in a very significant way. Yesterday we had speakers highlighting that in the plenary sessions. So blended finance also, philanthropic foundation should take it seriously, not just parking their funds, but also sharing whatever learning and capacity they have accumulated so far, so that could lead to some concrete results. So the last 2 points I have here is now when we do that, how to do all these things in a systematic way. First of all, there has to be some institutional targets and undertaking climate vulnerability and risk assessments. Then we need to have the adaptation finance or whatever financing compatible with life principles. It has to happen at the initial phases of the project design. How would it happen? It is an open area we need to discuss. But from my readings of infrastructure projects for some years, I would see that all the work lies at the DPR stage, the detailed project preparation stage. That how do you ensure that the railway project is not going to lead to deforestation, is not going to displace any society from anywhere, or it's not going to affect the human rights. So all these ESG principles that we are talking about, how do you convince the MDB, the other angel investors or private investors that we are doing our best to minimize, if not at least prevent or eliminate it entirely, at least minimize the risks of depletion of natural resources, depletion of displacing the indigenous communities, or violating anybody's right to development. So that becomes a quite big challenge for us to do that. Of course, the academic literature talks about everything, but life economy is basically a shift in the mindset of the stakeholders. It's not just the burden on the individual. Yesterday we talked about the behavioral change, but it's not just individual. The firms also needs to understand. I was discussing with Professor Bhatt the other day, the first day, that the firms, why are they not investing in clean or green technologies? Because their profit is not yet threatened. The business model they have followed so far is helping them to earn profits. Once they are assured that no, my business model is going to fail if I don't change, if I don't invest in clean technologies, in green technologies, I'm going to lose my market, they will not do. But they are not yet threatened in terms of their market share and profit. So they are not doing it. But they are also forgetting that if they don't invest now, they are going to invest in multiple times higher in future. So with this, I stop here. And if I have any further remarks, I'll contribute later. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Dr. Priya. Next, I would like to invite Ambassador Majiv Singh Puri, the distinguished fellow from Turkey.
Kusuma, thank you very much. Lovely to have someone from the land of the Angkor Wat. Thank you very much. I want to give at least a couple of minutes of my time to Mr. Pradeep Mehta here from CUTS, because I want him to speak about something that he's looking at, trying to mobilize globally. So Pradeep, please be ready. So Kusuma and our friends here, look, we are talking here about mobilizing huge amounts of money for an economy that basically targets and works towards the life principles. Let's try and understand what happened in the session before this. I hope all of you agree that one of the big takeaways of that large session was that sustainability, or at least life, cannot be defined by just one word, and that is climate change. It has to be defined by at least sustainability, and actually what that session underscored was that it has to be underscored by social inclusion, the entire issue of the society and people. Now, what is happening in the world and in the real world? You've all heard about this 100 billion pledge for climate action, which happened in Copenhagen. The latest report, that was 2009. The latest report from the OECD is very interesting. It says that in the year 2021, the countries of the OECD were able to rustle up some $89.7 billion. So I hope you figure out by the year 2023 end, they'll say we've got 99.25. We've done it. Right, Paolo? That's the way life is. Understand the way these things happen. But the interest here is not just climate, although I will tell you frankly, it's the only thing that will get you money. The rest is your baby, your problem. Now, I want to make some points to you which are in keeping with reality and the reality of things. And I thought, Kusuma, I'm delighted that you are here from Cambodia, and we have my old friend Poshraj here from Nepal, and others here from, smaller countries. Look, the G20 and the developing countries in the G20 are a different kettle of fish, and that needs to be understood. Actually, Poshraj, the reality of life is that global negotiations, especially in the climate domain, because it's the only serious negotiation. All other negotiations are talk shop negotiations. It's a so serious one because it has implications other than the WTO, where again similar things happen. The negotiations have hugely shifted to being between north to south, to now being negotiations of between the south and the large developing countries being put in one side. This is reality. If you don't understand this, then we are talking about completely different chalk and cheese kind of scenarios. And so therefore, I thought that in the context of G20, we are really looking at what countries like India, Brazil, Indonesia, and there's one country which is not in the G20, but frankly is one of the champion countries which will be targeted, is Nigeria. Because it is really the champion in Africa. It's the largest economy by far in every single sense of the term. And the largest that's going through. It has lots of other problems, but it is what it is. It is a powerhouse economy in various senses. So you are going to have these sets of issues. The next point, and Professor Priyadarshi Das, mentioned it right at the outset. You're going to get government monies. Come on, let's wake up, man. It's not happening. Yes, sir, Nepal will get. Cambodia will get. Not India. We also won't be able to say we should get. And these are the realities of geopolitics and realities of the life in which you are situated. What happens then? You have no choice but to encourage and ensure that private capital flows. Did you all know that, let's take climate, which is the biggest thing that people talk about. The requirements of climate are what? $5-6 trillion. The group of 20s expert panel to put it down to $3 trillion. The G20 document said 5 trillion. So let's go by 5 trillion. But do you know what is the level of global savings and savings in the developed world? They are much more than $5 trillion. Much more than 5 trillion. We're talking about $20 trillion savings. And therefore, what is the key element? To make it attractive for private capital in the developed world to invest in the developing world. Why don't they do it? One is, we in the developing world have lots of issues with our policies, the sustainability of those policies, changing policies, etc. Secondly, we don't have capacities to absorb this kind of capital. But thirdly, comes a very interesting element. You can call it whatever, but it is this thing which ends down to currency risk. Do you know that if we don't look at the absolute today's figures of very high interest rates in the world, a year back, you could borrow in US dollars at 1.5% or even less. And do you know what the landed cost of that borrowing in the United States would have been in a country like India? And sir, I'm not talking about Nepal or Cambodia. What it would have been in the case of India with a blue chip company, triple rated company, it would not have been less than 7 to 8%. Where is the 6% spread? It is just axiomatic that it goes towards what in financial terms is called hedging costs. But in otherwise, it's all you can call currency risks and so on and so forth. I'm very glad to have Mr. Soni Kapoor here with us, and someone who's a practitioner. Economists find lots of problems with these kind of things. But the guy who's in finance will figure out that, guys, I'm sorry, I have no choice but to hedge my bets. So I have a very simple kind of thing. We can pitch for many things. Increase the capital of the MDBs. We can pitch for all of them. There is this G20 report. It's got everything that you want. We don't have to deliberate about it here. But I want to make one pitch. If the MDBs can be moved to bring about institutional arrangements which can lower this currency risk costs, even, I'm not saying by 6%, by 3%, can you imagine what the flows of capital will become available and what would flow? The rest is up to you. You need to have the capacities to absorb and you need to have the rules in place. But the costs will considerably come down. And after that, I'm not saying voila, but frankly, the abilities to be able to do large-scale action in large countries goes up. Let me make a point to you. I'm talking only of climate. I'm not talking about life economy. It has so many implications of what you have to do yourself. In fact, so many small countries have done so much better in terms of the social side than we as a large country have done. Our Gini coefficients are going haywire. In the last session, our friend from Bangladesh pointed out to us that while we are all clapping for Bangladesh being one of the greatest examples of GDP growth, their Gini coefficients are going haywire. But that's the fact. In Nepal also you've seen it, isn't it? There are few guys sitting in Australia, they're building buildings and buildings, one taller and bigger than the other. But it's the nature of the way capitalism works. And you've seen it in the United States, you see it elsewhere. But if we can get the MDBs to set up creatively, innovatively, institutional mechanisms which will lower this cost, we'll be able to attract private capital in large amounts because the costs bearing by us in the developing world become that much less. I'll stop. Pradeep, up to you.
Yes, you can. You have 2 minutes to share.
I'll try to do it in 2 minutes, but I have many things to speak about. Carrying on from where Ambassador Manjeet left, I think the question that I would like to ask you is, when you talk in terms of risk finance, the point which has not been mentioned is what are the opportunities available for finance to invest in the developing world? Now, will that be economically feasible or not? That is another second question, as you would see quite often. So Right. And a point which you made, Dr. Dash, in terms of philanthropy and blended finance, these are two different issues. They're not, please don't merge them. And what we are looking at is this is a campaign that we are running, as Ambassador pointed out. We distributed this pamphlet. What we are looking at is what he rightly said is $5 trillion. The estimate for the kind of reparation for both climate and we've added biodiversity also. Let us not ignore biodiversity. The Convention on Biodiversity took place just 1 month after Sharm el-Sheikh, and that is also looking at about something like $600 billion need in order to repair the harm which has been done. And both climate and biodiversity are interlinked also. I can give you several examples. Say Amazon forest, for example. You're looking at biodiversity and climate both. It's a very classic example that we are looking at as one large example, very vivid example that we all are aware of. And there are several other examples. But leaving it that, what we're saying is that has to be a united approach to both climate and biodiversity. Secondly, we are building up a narrative to answer this question. We're all aware that if you look at from the time of June 92 Earth Summit, the promises made have never been kept. In Earth Summit, a promise was made about $238 billion by the developed world in order to feed into the World Environment Facility or Global Environment, GEF. Only $2 billion came. And the rest never came. So even today's promises, as we are looking at, is the kind of current debate which is going on in Abu Dhabi. There is now an understanding on the mechanism for the loss and damage fund to be managed by the World Bank and not to be owned by the World Bank, because the developing world felt that it was not. They don't have that kind of trust in the World Bank, but there is probably, as an institution, is one of the best that can manage it. However, it will be overseen by an international committee which will comprise of donors as well as donees, all kinds of countries. And the question which you raised, Dr. Dash, about the distinction between mitigation and adaptation, I'm not going to look at. But the point what I'm going to only, Madam, just to conclude, is we have designed that there is a bouquet of funds. One of them came up in G20 Cannes in Europe 10 years ago, what was called the Tobin tax. That if you levy a tax of 0.01% on international currency flows, you're able to raise at least a few $1 trillion. Europe supported it, and Europe continues to practice it within European countries. However, US shot it down because quite evidently, politically, it would have meant weakening of the dollar. And that is what they didn't want to happen to see. So what we have suggested is a bouquet of funds, and therefore to create a fund of funds to look at both climate and biodiversity, which will be totally from non-government sources. And blended finance is by and large public-private partnerships and stuff like this, where private capital can come in, where there are feasible projects. And there is a question which I wanted to ask Manjeev as well, that quite often there is no feasible project that you can be. This has happened many times in the past as well, where the project feasibility is not there, the returns are very poor, and therefore investments do not come. Having said that, this is available. This is there on our website also, and happy to talk about it later as well. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Pradeep. Next, I would like to invite Dr. Paulo Esteves, a professor from the Institute of International Relations of the Pontifical Catholic University from Brazil.
Thank you, Chair. I'll try to address the two questions through the topics in this particular lab, and I would say that for me the most innovative perspective that comes from life is its global nature. Basically, either we have life as a global economy, or we don't have it at all. First, because it understands that the planetary and social boundaries are a global issue, but as any global issue, as Professor Dash said, it has to be seen and has to be addressed via local perspectives or through local perspectives. Otherwise, we know exactly which perspectives will come to the fore. Our problem is, in terms of development finance and global financial architecture, the topics in our hands that were already addressed, all this system were built to foster national economic development in the first place, while keeping the historical asymmetries in place. So it's a system to foster development at the periphery of the system without changing or without altering the distribution of power and economic means in the international system itself. To have the life economy in place, we must have a completely shift in the financial and global in the global financial architecture. Our problem is we live in a time of a nation first. We live in a time that we are discussing deglobalization instead of global solutions, and growing polarization, and we cannot expect a huge shift for that because of that. I think we have some lessons learned from India's presidency in the G20. We had a difficult experience in Indonesia, where no consensual final communique was adopted. Indeed, India all of a sudden managed to come with a consensual final communique. And I think there is a lesson to be learned in this experience, which is related to the non-alignment of India in the present context. It is precisely the fact that India is not aligned in this power dispute or the polarization that we have now that allow the presidency to come with a consensual communique, putting aside geopolitics, at least for a little while. And this lesson must be learned, and we should harness and we should improve the Indian experience in a way that we come with a common agenda, or we take advantage of the G20 to come with a common multilateral agenda. Not the reform of the entire system per se, because that's not going to happen. What's happening today in Washington is basically the West blaming China for not contributing, and China saying they are not contributing because they will not have the voting power in the international financial institutions. So it is an egg and chicken dilemma, and it will not be solved as such. But we can take from India's experience the idea of having something minimalist, which would be, to use the sentence in the trendy word, some kind of a mission-oriented multilateralism. It's multilateralism to solve specific problems that will affect the life economy, that will enable the life economy, particularly climate and inequality. My time is almost up. So I would like to retain this idea of a mission-oriented multilateralism or minimalist multilateralism to solve problems related to the life economy, or to come with solutions that are consistent with the life economy principles, and call the attention to 2 or 3 points that are being discussed right now. Ambassador Manjeev mentioned the 84 billion that are coming from the north for climate change. Well, this money is coming basically from ODA, I have to say. And ODA is not a particular, first, ODA is key in the international financial architecture. Second, ODA was not tailored to deal with that kind of problem, because ODA has a purpose of developing fostering development in the developing world. And climate change, sorry, it has a dual component that, in a way, allows mutual benefits for developed countries and developing countries as well. But with the huge caveat that these things are either discussed, or the ODA allocation is either discussed in Paris, or it is discussed in the capitals of traditional donors. And the agenda that comes from the traditional donors' capitals are about mitigation in the first place. So it's basically tackling or addressing the problem of climate changing throughout electric buses. While our problem in the South is not exactly or has not the electrical buses as priorities. Our priority in maybe in Brazil, I have to say, sanitation, which is much more basic than the electric buses. And the second concern is these electric buses are being built with minerals coming from the South, but these minerals are extracted in the South. They go to Europe, they assemble the batteries, and they, and in a way, they come to this new green economy, while the South is still subject to the extractive industry. So I want to call the attention to the fact that there is a reform, a silent reform of ODA in place. It's happening during the last 10 years, and it is happening in a very, let's say, in a very hidden way, because it's happening in a technical fashion with the creditor reporting system, and it is not a public decision about how ODA should be allocated. That's the first one. The second one is the fact that we do need to come with alternative sources of finance, where they allowing a common table to discuss both what would be the global priorities regarding the life economy, and second, a set of flows that where all the countries contribute, but they contribute according to their capacities and they benefit according to their needs. And not according to the needs of the donors. This is the second point I would like to raise. And the third one is the idea that we may not be able to change the entire system, but perhaps we can change some windows within the World Bank, some windows within the regional development banks, to create spaces for allocation of common resources that are actually discussed publicly and multilaterally, and truly multilaterally. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Paulos. Because we have a time limit, I would like to invite all of you to join as a group of 4, because we have 16 people in this room. So we can have 4 groups, and you can choose the group that you want. And if your group is full, please go to the next group. And we're going to, on your table, you will see the A4 paper. One group, we only need one of this so that you can harvest what the other participant, you can assign one person to do the harvest, and the harvester can also share as well and put it up there, because what you write here will be important for our rapporteur to take note after. Yes. So you're going to have, because time now, we're going to have a 20 minutes to do the group discussion. I'm going to let you all make your group organically.
All 220 million people in darkness for 12 hours. Nigeria has the same electric generation capacity with a population of 220 million people as the city of Austin.
Join the group where there's no that group.
Universal access to clean energy, sustainable energy for all, which is even a UN body now. If that is successful, when that is successful, every African will have enough electricity for one daily life. And one average African family of 6 people might be able to run a refuge. Because that's what successful is. So that's how that is, right? Yeah, that's the right? So my perspective, which is like, that's what I say to you, right? Create a world where Italy, with its best days behind it, and optimistic growth rate of 1.5%, declining population and labor force, right? With a salary attached to GDP ratio of 44%, is able to borrow 150% of GDP for next to no money. Just go and sit with them. The youngest demographic in the world, with a tax to GDP ratio of only 18%, and there's only one million which is up. With a growth potential that is 6 to 8%, gets dropped down. That 27% debt to GDP is a world that's fundamentally stuck. Just one growth, efficient allocation of capital, viable pension funds. The terms are right. There's enough money, and there will be enough projects that will be realized. And one of these issues, right? So currency was talking about, but would you believe it if I told you that the G10 currencies, which is all the largest economies in the world, plus Sweden, right, and Switzerland, G10 currency volatility over the past 15 odd years has been higher than emerging market currency volatility. That within a year or two, the Japanese yen US dollar rate varies by 10-20%. Right? I mean, like, so outside of low income countries which are not like macroeconomic consequential emerging markets, I mean, it's, currency, it's just one of those issues that's used as an excuse. The fundamental problem is the first world problem. So I'll say, for example, the head of Sweden's largest pension fund was a great friend of mine. He got fired in March, and he got fired because he had invested in Silicon Valley Bank. Okay? But his fund had outperformed all other Swedish pension funds by 2 or 3% every year for 15 years, right? Now, if you accumulate 2 or 3% out of that, which means thus he had built up the fund 30-40% greater than all his competitors. And this one small investment, because it made the headline for such an issue, they fired him, and despite that investment, that fund still outperformed. Right? So the problem is, first of all, there's a career risk. Whoever sticks their neck out, right? So when things turn right, that's fine. If things go bad by doing something that not everybody else is doing, you are screwed. You have a massive career. So there is a first mover problem in this. The second institutional arrangement.
Hello, everyone. I would like to invite all of you to go back to your seat, and then we're going to do the convergence. All right. So we have 3 teams in here, and I would like to invite the first group, Srikan, to share what you have harvested from your group. You have 3 minutes, by the way.
Thank you. And so in our group, we had a very sort of complete agreement on to disagree with what has been said earlier. So let me explain what. See, one of the things what we feel is basically that the climate finance is not charity. I think what has now happened is we should not give a free ride to the developed countries and say, no, we know that the public finance is not going to come. Let us tackle private finance. Let us try to find blended finance, etc. Because if you just give up so easily on the rule of law, then what I would say is that we are never going to basically have enough funds for mitigation nor have enough funds for adaptation. So it's too early to give up. And I think this pressure must be there. must be enhanced rather, so that basically the developed countries and particularly the Annex 1 countries live up to their commitments in the Convention and the Paris Agreement. In fact, in the Paris Agreement, the developing countries have given away much more than what they got because they agreed to voluntary targets. But that was in return for technology transfer and climate finance. Now, what's the state of affairs? You have set up a green climate fund as part of the grand Copenhagen summit. But what is the total money available with the green climate fund? Today, it is only $20 billion. So that is really pathetic. So I think we need to basically continue to raise it, whether we like it or not. Nobody in the private sector is going to invest unless they see a definite return and unless basically they have an anti-competitive stance. Like, for example, what we see in these so-called just energy transition plans, we see basically these are only avenues for certain investors and banks to basically put their money in profitable projects so that they can earn money. They are not doing it to fight climate. They are not doing it as a sort of development finance. They are doing it purely to earn profits, and that's natural. And so therefore, to say that okay, that we will go for this JETP, for example, in Indonesia, is not going to succeed because the government of Indonesia has rejected some of the main conditionalities on the complete stoppage of captive coal plants in the future for their industrial development. So therefore, these sort of conditionalities to force a transition are not going to happen. The developing countries are suffering from climate change, will suffer more than developed countries, and I think they deserve what the rule of law has given them, which is basically adequate climate finance and at least finance for the technology transfer, which also is not happening till today. And last but not the least, this sort of calls for tripling the solar, renewable energy, wind and solar, etc. I think these are all basically doing only lip service to climate change, because today, as per the International Energy Agency, wind and solar contribute only 2.4% of the total global energy supply. If you make the 2.4 7.2 also, it is not going to resolve the climate change, because what is happening in India is, because of the grid integration issues, it is the coal-based power plants that have to dance up and down to integrate the renewable energy sources into the grid. So by making them dance up and down every day, you are making them more inefficient, increasing the emissions intensity, reducing the energy efficiency. So therefore, we are having all sorts of distorted incentives, and we need to basically look at how do we provide developing countries with clean, firm, that is base load sources of energy generation. Until the time those sources are discovered, I think climate finance, even for fossil fuels, as long as that is done in a responsible manner, is a mandatory objective for the development of the developing countries. Thank you.
Thank you, Srikanth. Next, I would like to turn to group 2 to share. Let's give a floor to Shwati.
Okay, so
Next.
So we discussed here, as per the paper, what solutions or innovative breakthrough solutions can the life economy provide to our topic. We have heard here all the experts here, and basically we were trying to understand what are the reforms as a institution or a country can think of to bring all the countries at a equal level in terms of financing and other things. So few solutions we have think first of all, there is a urgent need of accessibility of finance, which is very much required. So to enhance that access to finance, there is a need of delinking availability of finances with credit ratings, because many of the countries get the funds on the basis of their ratings and other things on the basis of other projects and funding things. And if you think about in terms of investors, so there is a proper risk mitigation measures are required in terms of the investors' point of view. If there are any complications and challenges for the investors, how the countries are mitigating them, or what are the metrics or the measurement thinking they are planning. And then SDG is a global issue now, so everybody is talking about. So making SDG finance attracting for the retail investors, and we can align the expenditures and other things with the government budget line. And fourth point, we have just thought of key capacity building of financial institutions is required to align with the sustainability and other things. And what next points actions are needed to harness the full potentials of the life economy to drive solutions? I think there is a need to scale up the use of companies where natures and next generations capitals and stakeholders are required to work together, where the companies and government work together to for these all global issues. So I think alignment is required to bring bringing finance for the different countries. I think these are the points from the R group.
Thank you, Swati, for sharing. Less than 3 minutes. That's good. Thank you. So next we go to our last team. I would like to invite Ambassador Majid to share.
Yeah, Kuzuma, thank you. I want to tell you that we had not just an animated discussion, but we had a discussion in which we learned a lot from a colleague of ours, Mr. Soni Kapoor, and his own personal experiences of the real world dealing with the matter. But I want to make one comment before I tell you what we suggested. I want to say that I very much agree with our colleagues on my right on what the fundamental point he said was. Base load generation. It's not happening as a result of these things, but you have to. UNFCCC is about international burden sharing. Sir, it's not about climate action. It's about international burden sharing. You have to understand that. And there, the game has shifted from 1992 North versus South Kyoto Protocol to one of large developing countries having to provide for everybody else. That's the name of the game. So you are absolutely right. We must say what you said we must say. But that doesn't mean you should thereafter be looking around with a bowl in hand. It's not going to happen. Because international burden sharing, doing whatever they are doing, the reality is you will have to do. And since if you won't do, there will be consequences not only of these climate type, but very serious political consequences. And I just want to tell you, if any of you are here from the coal sector, I hope you understand the kind of issues that we are facing regarding coal and coal financing and how things will go in the front. It's all very well to say, we will do it ourselves. Please, can you be a country all by yourself? Then you can't be. You want to be part of the world. And none of us, not any of us who are in the G20 and India, certainly not, does not want to be singled out on the most important subject of the world. That's the nature of the political economy that we are faced with. Our solution, because we are looking for one solution to give, not hundreds of, full alphabet list here. Simple one. This de-risking foreign exchange is by far the most critical thing because private finance is the critical element to it. All other things fall foul of political economy. Mr. Pradeep Mehta highlighted all these Tobin taxes and all. The word tax just doesn't sit well with people. You won't be able to sell the idea. But you need the money. We have to build capacities, we have to build rules, we have to do all of them. And as a solution, can we persuade the MDBs to have an institutional mechanism, another window, another agency, which will help insignificantly, and I want to say not by 0.5 percentage point, but try and do something about lowering the cost of de-risking. That should help propel private capital from the developed world to the developing world and at least give you the most important ingredient for doing something. Thank you. Sir, I happen to be one of the guys quoted. But my thing is also part of the report.
Thank you, Ambassador. Because we have some time, so I would like to allow our participant here to ask questions to our keynote speaker or share your comment. So if you have a question or a comment, you can raise your hand and we can allow 1 or 2, depend on time.
Governor, how can we say thank you to you?
Can I just make a point? So we've distributed this campaign literature. We are aware that all this is not possible, but then you have to push the envelope. If you don't push the envelope, you won't even get part of it. This has been our experience in policy advocacy for long. That you have to continuously push the envelope, and all this is feasible. It's not unfeasible. Of course, there are political problems. As I said, Tobin tax was proposed in the G20 Europe summit. Europeans agreed to it, but US shot it down. So we'll have to look at what we're trying to say, that funding from state treasuries is going to not come. And promises will be made which will never be kept. So what do we do? So let us build up a bouquet of funds. And secondly, and more importantly, let us not ignore biodiversity. And this is, something which really hurts me, that we are ignoring biodiversity at our own peril. Climate alone is not the problem in the nature. Biodiversity is equally at a problem. And in fact, they should merge together both these conversations, Climate and biodiversity. Call it environment. That will become more comprehensive, sorry.
May I just... So, I don't know how many of you remember, but Ecuador had a president, Rafael Correa, right? Now, Rafael Correa was an environmentalist. He was a PhD economist, but an environmentalist. And one of the most biodiverse regions of the Amazon, they found a lot of oil, Yasuni ITT, right? So he had a very simple proposition, and we're talking like 10, 15 years back. So he put together a group of international advisors, and I was part of the team. And he said, okay, here's my request to you. We are a poor country, but you know what? We will forego $5 billion, which was the independent estimate of oil revenue. We will not touch the Yasuni region of the Amazon because of all the rich biodiversity, etc. Can you get rich countries to compensate us for half of this money, right? Even for 25% of this money, okay? 5 billion, 5 billion, okay? So we went around, we talked to everybody, we tried, proposed various mechanisms, escrow accounts to handle, governance, etc. We got, if I remember correctly, I might misremember a little bit, one pledge of $14 million from Norway after 2 years of trying, right? And the point is, where we are now, right? The world needs 200 Yasuni-like deals to be negotiated successfully within the next 5 years, right? Because essentially that's the macro picture, that the rich economies, out of everybody's self-interest, don't want us to destroy biodiversity, climate, etc. And, for economic needs, whenever there's a clash between climate or development imperative, in the year 2100, there is no trade-off, okay? But under limited resources as we have, there's a trade-off between primary education or mitigation, right? There's a trade-off between basic job creation or biodiversity loss. And we will always choose, any politician, any financier, any businessman, 5 to 10 year decision-making horizon, you would always choose development. So that's the scale of the challenge we face. And it was just shockingly bad. Only $14-15 million out of, reasonable request. Ecuador, a poor country, was taking the majority of the sacrifice, and we were not even able to come with 10% of the sacrifice they're making.
Anyway,
Thank you.
That's the final appeal.
And they ended up drilling.
That's the important part of this story.
Yeah,
also.
exactly.
We are building a coalition. The email address is given on the one. And please join the coalition. I mean, it won't cost you anything.
We're happy to join.
No membership fees.
Last but not least, I would like to invite Dr. Bhatt. He would like to share some.
Just wait.
Yeah. So, thank you very much for allotting these 3 minutes. In such meetings, you get confused where to begin and where should you end after listening to everybody. But fact of the matter is, which is increasingly becoming clear and clearer to everybody,
to the last mile person also, that nobody throws the seeds of charity. So, and in negotiations, you don't get what you deserve, you get what you negotiate. Having said that, the finance and the role of banks that was listed as one of the items, there is one item 2.1c, 2.1c of Paris Agreement, where banks are, MDBs are hiding behind that article that we will stop funding even the responsible use of fossil fuels. The colleague on the right, he said that wind does not blow, sun does not shine 24 into 7, and the contribution of these two are just 2.4%. Whether it is US, EU, or developing countries, the new report of IEA and Goldman Sachs report, both are out. 80% of our electricity, not only in this room, in the world, comes from fossil fuels. So, fossil fuel usage, responsible usage, is something should continue till batteries or other things become cheaper. There is no alternate. The thing which our colleague on the left said about biodiversity, you see the tragedy now. Tragedy today, it is not the question whether you want to save your biodiversity or not, but because of climate change, which is the epitome of all problems, even if you solve all other problems, including biodiversity, climate change will still keep on impacting you. It is the epitome, it is the ultimate thing. And when that happens, and when there are proposals of things like solar radiation modification by the world, which is now pending in the ICJ, one has to think, say for a country like mine, India, whether India will be able to hold on to its 4 hotspots, will it retain its mega diverse biodiversity status anymore? Will Indonesia do that? Will whichever biodiverse country? And treating nature to be offering solutions when nature will be heavily impacted by biodiversity. See the optics that the Western world is creating before you. That plant more trees, let them be dustbins or receptacles of CO2 for the world. No, trees are for much more greater uses, Forests are revered, are respected, are worshipped. Apart from worship, even otherwise, how can you now say that everything will be settled by biodiversity?
Cannot.
So please do not fall into this trap of nature-based solutions. Even IPCC has rejected it, has put it with a number of caveats. The NBS, there is no definition of nature-based solution in the literature. It was only a slang kind of a thing which has permeated the literature. So be very careful on demanding anything on biodiversity.
Per se.
Yes, per se. Yeah. And this demand is no new. It was a package deal at the Earth Summit. But somehow it was lost, and now you have biodiversity discussions after 2 years. And climate, everybody wants to run to Dubai and the next COP, whichever place, every year. So biodiversity, you people have agreed that you will not discuss.
Thank you, Dr. Bath. Dr. Bath and Dr. Pradeep, I think we're going to have a break soon, and we're going to have time to harvest as well. So I believe we can continue the discussion over there. Just to wrap this event up, do not go there. I count on my new fellow friend, Dr. Soni, to help me wrapping up this session, because finance is not my topic, so I would be very bad to wrap up what you have discussed. So I count on him to help me wrapping up this up, focus on not what is wrong, but what is strong. And then we're going to call this session off. Thank you.
Wonderful. This was a discussion all about finance, and this was a discussion nothing about finance, right? I mean, so the first thing, there was clear agreement in the room is that there's unfairness upon unfairness upon unfairness, you know, Russian doll levels of duplicity, double standards, unfairness, and, you know, that's a given, sadly, right? Now, there's two ways.
And cheating.
And cheating, of course, absolutely. And it continues, and it's going to get worse in Dubai. So I don't know if you guys saw the BBC breaking news, but the BBC breaking news was that Dubai had a plan to basically use, the Emirates had a plan to use COP to negotiate new oil deals. And somebody leaked the document. Anyway, so that's the level of duplicity. So now there's
rounds on the Twitter now.
Yeah. So the point is, there's two ways of looking at this, right? So either finally it's time to set the world right? Fairness will prevail, the poor shall inherit the earth, or there is a real politic perspective that, you know, what hasn't been happening for 200 years, what's going to change now, right? And I think while it's good to hope the poor shall inherit the earth, fairness will prevail, we must behave as if that's not going to happen. Then, you know, what are the options available? So one is, what can we do here within? And the second is, you know, have circumstances change outside. And here, I think there's note for optimism on both sides. So number one, right? I mean, we're not a backward third world part of the world anymore. We've got sophisticated human capital. We are sizable. And in some ways, the fact that everybody's scared of China, right, means, hey, you know, who else is around as a potential counterweight? So geopolitically, India and co, and, you know, broadly defined, has never been as significant, as important, for whatever reasons, honorable, not as we are now, right? So if we act obstreperous, if we want to be difficult, if we want to, you know, be the bully in the China shop, this is the time. You know, sorry for mixing metaphors. The second is that, you know, things have changed dramatically. So there were 4 tailwinds that drove this fantastic post-World War II golden age in the OECD countries. And in finance in particular, that was the secular decline in interest rate, halving of corporate tax rates. There was the benign inflationary environment because of China, $10 trillion of quantitative easing, and record profits as a share of GDP on both sides of the Atlantic, right? So all of this meant that Western finance, keeping the money in developed economies, managed to generate 8-9% of returns year after year. Why would they bother to come to a new place they don't know much about, such as India or Nigeria, where they might only get similar rates of return when they could lazily do it by investing in S&P 500? Now that environment has gone. So the choice now is, you earn 3% staying where you are, in which case all the pension funds are bankrupt, or however difficult it may be, however few projects there may be, however little you might know about India or Bangladesh, there is no choice but at a large scale for private funds to begin to look here, right? And it shouldn't be the job of NGOs, it shouldn't be the job of Indian government to set up projects. If I'm a $1 trillion fund, I have the level of sophistication and the interest to find and seed project developers and to make it happen, right? And if so much money wants to make it happen, it will. So we are at the cusp of that change. It can be accelerated by elements of de-risking, particularly on currency. But one way or the other, that's the situation, and that's the conversation shift we need. And I think it's going to happen. Our task is to make it happen now, rather than 5 or 10 years from now, because so much more would be lost on climate, biodiversity, opportunity if we wait 5-10 years. Thank you.
Thank you, Professor. Well, we have one more agenda left that we cannot skip. It's a photo session. So I would like to invite all of you to go out and take a picture. And if you do not like to be in the photo, you can opt out. All right.